All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. You know the look, right? We've all seen those DIY kitchen cabinet paint jobs that looked absolutely stunning on day one. But fast forward 6 months, and yeah, they're bubbling, they're peeling, they're chipping around the handles. It's a total nightmare. But here's the kicker, and this might actually surprise you. The failure almost never happens because of the paint itself. Nope. It happens because most people completely skip the foundational prep steps, the stuff that actually matters. So today, we're going to break down the actual science of adhesion. Because trust me, getting a factory-grade finish on your kitchen cabinets is entirely possible, as long as you rely on proper technique instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. To really put this into perspective, let's look at the sheer scale of what's at stake here. Ripping out and entirely replacing your kitchen cabinets, that's going to run you anywhere from $5,000 to a staggering $15,000. Ouch. But on the flip side, if you follow the correct methodology, a DIY paint job is only going to cost you between $150 to maybe $600 in materials. That is an absolutely enormous return on investment. The catch, though, you have got to get the process exactly right, or you're going to end up wishing you had just written that massive check for the replacements. So what goes wrong? Well, there are 3 critical mistakes that literally guarantee a failed project. First up, skipping the degreasing phase. Second, just grabbing some standard drywall primer from your garage instead of using a dedicated cabinet primer. And third, rushing that recoat process before the paint is actually fully dry. If you do any of these, the paint will literally lift right off the wood. So let's zoom in on that first mistake because it really sets the stage for disaster. This brings us to a super crucial concept: invisible contaminants. Think of it like this. Over the years, your kitchen cabinets build up this microscopic layer of cooking oil, grease, and just general waxy residue. And here is the really tricky part. Even if you scrub those doors until they literally shine to the naked eye, that microscopic barrier, it's still there. If you just slap paint or even a standard primer over that grease, it's like trying to tape something to a wet window. It completely blocks the paint from bonding to the wood. So peeling isn't just likely at that point, it's practically guaranteed if you don't chemically remove that invisible barrier. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, you need the right prep approach. You've probably heard the terms deglosser and liquid sander thrown around, sometimes even interchangeably, but there's actually a vital difference. A liquid sander is basically just a chemical that etches the surface, making it rough. That's it. But a true deglosser, it chemically removes that grease we just talked about, and it etches the surface at the exact same time. It knocks out the cleaning and the mechanical prep in one single step, which honestly is a massive time saver. Which perfectly tees up our next major point of failure: the primer. Look, standard water-based primer is fantastic on clean drywall, but on greasy kitchen wood, no way. It just sits right on the surface and fails. Even worse, it lets dark wood knots and those yellow grease stains bleed straight through into your beautiful final white paint. Shellac-based primer, on the other hand, is a whole different ballgame. It actually penetrates and chemically bonds to that glossy varnish. It completely seals in those tannins and cooking greases so they can literally never ruin your top coat. So, the big question is, how exactly do we get that smooth $15,000 factory finish on a $150 budget? Well, it all comes down to a few highly specific mechanical and chemical solutions. Let's transition over to the exact validated products that solve these specific problems we've been talking about. Our first logical step is tackling those invisible contaminants we discussed. And the most practical solution for this is Krud Kutter Gloss Off. Instead of spending hours manually scrubbing and sanding those smooth cabinet faces until your arms literally ache, you simply wipe this formula on. It goes right to work actively dissolving that invisible waxy buildup and grease, making absolutely sure your primer will actually have something solid to grip onto. The real magic of this stuff is the 10-minute dwell time. You literally just wipe it on, let it sit for 10 minutes, and it etches the surface without you ever having to manually sand. Plus, it's dry in under 20 minutes. Now, full disclosure, the trade-off here is a pretty strong smell. Opening a window is an absolute must, but for eliminating the #1 cause of paint failure, yeah, it is entirely worth the ventilation. Okay, so once the surface is etched and clean, we need bulletproof adhesion. And that brings us to our second solution, Zinsser Bin Primer. Because this specific primer is shellac-based, it has this incredibly unique ability to grip onto slick, previously varnished surfaces that regular primers would honestly just slide right off of. Think of it like building an impenetrable wall between the old wood and your brand new paint. This primer locks away all that tannin and grease bleed-through we mentioned earlier, and it dries in just 45 minutes, which is great because it keeps your momentum going. Just keep in mind, you will need denatured alcohol to clean your brushes afterward because water won't even put a dent in shellac. But remember, we're building a foundation here that needs to last a decade, so that little extra cleanup step is completely worth it. All right, now we move from the chemical side of things to the mechanical. Because honestly, the fastest way to make a DIY job look totally amateur is leaving permanent, textured brushstrokes in the paint. The mechanical solution for this? The Purdy XL Glide 2-inch angle sash brush. Listen, a high-end brush is absolutely not the place to cut corners. Why? Because the tool you use literally dictates the texture of your final finish. While it might feel like a bit of an investment up front, these specific clear-cut synthetic bristles are specifically designed to release paint smoothly. It practically eliminates those dreaded chatter marks. The 2-inch angled width is perfect for cutting into edges too. And here's a real pro insight for you. If you use this brush on the edges and then immediately follow up with a 4-inch mini foam roller on the flat, open faces, you're basically going to mimic a high-end professional spray job. It's a total game changer. Finally, we need a top coat that can actually handle the abuse of a busy kitchen. I mean, standard wall paint is going to chip the very first time you bump it with a frying pan. So we're looking at the Rust-Oleum Transformations Basics cabinet paint. This stuff is engineered specifically for this kind of high-traffic environment. It creates a specialized shell that actively resists scratching, chipping, and heavy everyday cleaning. What really makes this ideal for a DIYer, though, is its leveling ability. It literally smooths itself out as it dries, which works perfectly with that foam roller technique we just talked about. You end up with a totally washable surface that's dry to the touch in just 30 minutes. Just a quick heads up, it usually comes in quart sizes, and one of those will perfectly cover about 50 square feet. And while it does dry super quickly, you'll definitely want to give it 7 full days to reach its absolute rock-solid hardness. Okay, so how do we actually put all this together? Let's walk through an actionable roadmap. Step 1. Take the doors off and heavily label them with painter's tape. Trust me, trying to guess which door goes where later is a complete nightmare. Next, clean everything with your deglosser. If you started with a really high gloss varnish, maybe give it a quick light scuff with 220 grit sandpaper. Then apply a thin coat of your shellac primer, followed by 2 thin coats of paint. Oh, and here's a crucial tip. Inspect your wet paint with a strong work light held at a sharp raking angle. It highlights any drips or brush marks so you can fix them before they dry. Then finally, reinstall everything. Just to give you a realistic picture of the time commitment here, this is generally a weekend project. Day 1 is all about the heavy lifting, taking the doors off, degreasing, and getting that primer on. Day 2, that's for applying your 2 thin coats of paint with your high-quality brush and roller. By day 3, you're good to carefully reinstall the doors and hardware. But remember that 7-day rule. The paint needs a full week to completely cure, so definitely treat those cabinets gently for the first few days. And that essentially wraps up our explainer. Look, by understanding the basic science of adhesion, refusing to skip that critical deglossing phase, and using the exact right primer and tools, you truly can save yourself thousands of dollars while pulling off a stunning kitchen transformation. If you want the full breakdown and all the specific product links, you should definitely check out the original article. But it does leave us with a pretty interesting question. If a $15,000 renovation can be perfectly matched by $150 of materials and a weekend of patience, what other expensive home upgrades are actually just basic chemistry waiting to be understood? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.